All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Keefer. I'm an assistant to Chief Del Riley. I helped him to edit and publish his autobiography over here, which is on the table. It hasn't received enough plugs yet tonight. And I'm here to do the slightly boring work of going through the proposed Millbrook Cannabis Control Law and the proposed Custom Election Code Law to break down some of the issues with it, which you can find written in great detail in this information package. And as a little bit of background about myself, I'm of United Empire Loyalist and Ukrainian descent. And I've been working with traditional indigenous people since 2006 to help articulate their interests, to write for them, to make media for them, etc. I've got a bachelor's degree in history, master's degree in political science, and 6 years in a PhD program in political economy. And so I brought that kind of training to have a go at looking through these documents. And since 2015, I began working with the first indigenous cannabis dispensary that opened in North America, a place called Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga, Mohawk Territory. And after that dispensary opened, there were a number more that opened and a number of more reserves, and I'd worked with those as well, and have probably worked with about 30, 40, 50 different communities, and many of whom they've all struggled with the same issues that you're facing here today, with band councils not sure what they're doing and then deciding to push forward and kind of come up with or create some kind of laws and regulations, and with grassroots entrepreneurs who are asserting their treaty rights and going forward and acting in what they feel is with their right and in the best interest of their people. And so none of the issues that you're dealing with here at Millbrook are new or unique. They are very similar from community to community. And I guess the first thing to say, I'm going to talk first about the cannabis control law. And the key thing for you to know about it is that although it's called the Millbrook Cannabis Control Law, and although you were promised a great consultation, and although, from what I hear, hundreds of thousands of dollars of your money was spent on coming up with this cannabis law and on doing community consultations and all of this effort, the law that is entitled the Millbrook Cannabis Control Law is actually the Ganawage Cannabis Control Law. And you can see this in the second page in your package here. I went through your law word for word and compared it with the Ganawage Cannabis Law, which came out in 2018. And you'll see that every bit of the text that's shaded in there is word for word the same as Ganawage's law. So it was literally, you paid a lot of money to get somebody to copy and paste this law. And unfortunately, it's not the first time that this has happened. In another community that I'm aware of, a consultant came in and said, I'm going to help you make your cannabis control law. You clearly need it. It literally did copy-paste the entire Ganawage cannabis control law there as well, charged $40,000 for the copy-paste, and forgot to do a find replace to take out all the words where it said Ganawage, so we left a few of them in. It was a little embarrassing. But you can see it's about 80% copied in, out of the Ganawage control law. And there's a few the parts that are not from the Ganawage control law, I'd be very interested in knowing who wrote them or how they came to be included, because they contain wording that is, for lack of a better term, it's as if it came directly out of the federal government or the RCMP, and you went to them and said, hey, what exactly do you want to add to this? Because the wording and the terminology is Well, it's out of the Canadian law books. And I don't want to go through the entire basis of what the Kahnawake law is. I'll just focus on a few of the themes of it. One is that it sets up this so-called arm's length cannabis control board. And this is how the band council says, well, it's not really us doing this. We're hiring the best and brightest, and we're putting them on this control board, and they're going to control everything to do with cannabis. But the things that they're controlling to do with cannabis is that the band council basically becomes the community's weed dealer, becomes the wholesaler, the taxer, the regulator, and all of the cannabis in the community has to come from Health Canada, right? It can't come from Indigenous sources. You can't, as an Indigenous person, grow it in the ground, take it to the Indigenous cannabis testing facilities, of which there are numerous ones of them. I'm aware of at least 2 of them in Ontario that exceed all of what Health Canada does. Legacy 420 and Medicine Wheel Natural Healing in Alderville. And so what they're saying is every little seed, every gram has got to come through Canada's system. What does that mean? It means it's grown by a corporation. It means that it is part of their whole taxation regime, where the Canadian cannabis industry, about 50% of its costs are from the taxation that's going to the government. And it means that the cannabis is also irradiated. So from an Indigenous perspective of seeing the spirit of a plant, it's completely killed. And it also means that it has to follow a recreational model, not a medicinal model. So none of the stores could say, well, you could use this strain to help you sleep at night, or this salve will help you with your arthritis, or this will, this will deal with your cancer, or this can, help you in. There's, thousands of ways in which cannabis can help you, and cannabis was a central part of most physicians' medicinal kits before the pharmaceutical industry came along with the Rockefellers and the invention of the oil industry and the development of that. So they set up a cannabis control board. Now, who gets to pick the cannabis control board? Well, it might surprise you, but the Millbrook RCMP get a say in helping to pick it. And this board has full powers to do whatever it wants after enforcing the system upon the people to sell only Health Canada cannabis. They get to look into the books, they get to know who's hired, they get to make decisions about who is of good character and who is not of good character. And it simply says in this law, if this committee decides that you're not of good character, well, then you don't get to participate in the cannabis industry in Millbrook First Nation. It also says if you have a criminal record, you can't. But even if you don't have a criminal record and they don't like you, then you can't either. So it's an incredibly arbitrary kind of system. And the other thing about it is that this Kahnawake cannabis law came into effect, it was originally created in 2018, right when legalization happened. And Kahnawake at this point, at this precise moment, does not have a single cannabis store operating under its law. This much vaunted law that lawyers and consultants have made hundreds of thousands of dollars copying and pasting does not actually work. It doesn't work in Kahnawake. It doesn't work. It's been a similar version was passed in Tyendinaga, in Akwesasne, and in Six Nations. And it was most aggressively pushed in Six Nations, where the Band Council tried to force itself to be the wholesaler. But Canada looked at their law and said, well, actually, you're under the Indian Act, and you don't have the right to control cannabis. You can't make a cannabis law any more than you could make, say, a Millbrook cocaine law and decide to make cocaine legal, right? It is not within the powers of the Band Council to do anything that goes against the parliamentary system. You have to follow within it. So the only thing you can do as a Band Council is to make a system that harmonizes with the federal and the provincial regulations. And this is what the law does. And it, it has a distinction of making it a little bit worse than the original was. And in this package, you'll actually find 3 position papers that refer to the Millbrook cannabis law. The one at the very end of the package was when the Micmac Rights Association was originally started as the Micmac Cannabis Association. And that one is entitled A Response to the Millbrook First Nation's Community Consultation on Cannabis. And it sort of warned that this, it pointed out the problems with Ganawagi's law. It articulated alternatives to it. And it quoted from the band's own report that they produced, saying what they were going to do. And I just want to read this to you out of the band's own report. And they did a little consultation, brought some people together right at the beginning. And they said, a common theme amongst most, if not all, participants was a general malaise or mistrust of Chief and Council's ability to regulate cannabis in the community. For example, many participants indicated that they had previously attempted to address cannabis at council meetings and engage in dialogue, but were either ignored or stifled in their submission. In addition, participants expressed concern that council members may be in a conflict of interest because some council members were actively engaged in the cannabis economy and were therefore making decisions for their own personal benefit. This is their own writing, not mine or the association's or anyone else's. I'm on page 1 of 7 of the initial response. So this is actually early in the package. And then their own document continues, furthermore, concern was expressed by some participants that council would develop regulations for their own personal benefit, thereby shutting out community members from benefiting from a cannabis economy. And this is exactly what happened. What the people warned about in their own consultation with band council is what has unfortunately ended up happening. And of particular note, there's a connection to this to other bylaws that the band has passed, such as the bylaw on construction and the building moratorium, where they have actually admitted that they've been taking steps to slow down and to disrupt individuals who are trying to open their own stores. And of course, this is in taking the position that they're doing, they're going directly against your own treaty rights that are articulated, for example, in the 1752 Peace and Friendship Treaty. It says that you have the right to bring for sale to Halifax or any other settlement within this province skins, feathers, fowl, fish, or any other thing they shall have to sell, where they shall have liberty to dispose thereof to the best advantage. And meanwhile, the cannabis control law actually seeks to regulate the prices that you can sell your own products at. I mean, they're not your own products because you have to buy Health Canada products from the giant multinational corporations that monopolize the cannabis industry. But as you can see, it's a clear violation of your treaty rights. There's much more. I think I will leave that as the. I think that's the main thing. I need to talk about the election code is the last thing, if I can finish that. I know we're under very tight timeline. So the second sheet here is the custom election code. And this is actually even more frightening than the cannabis control law because they didn't copy and paste it from somewhere else. They came up with it on their own. And it is, they managed to, in the name of saying, well, we're going to build our own kind of sovereign system and get away from the Indian Act, they actually made something that's much worse than the Indian Act banned election regulations or the First Nations Election Act, which are two other options that you could use, which are at least fair and forthright. The craziest thing, so the thing does a few things, like it cuts down removes the number of councillors from 12, turns it to 8, lengthens the period of time from 2 years in office to 3 years. But the general thing that it does is that it also changes the job descriptions of chief and council. So councilors no longer have to be transparent and accountable to the people. They have to act in concert with the other members of council, which means they have to go along, sing the same tune, not represent the people or their interests. And the other thing they have to do is they have to respect this strange thing that they've invented called the band administration jurisdiction, right? And jurisdiction is the sort of top sovereign power over the laws and the decisions. So they make it so that it's essentially the election code is strengthening the power of the band administration and reducing that of the councillors. It also has this utterly insane section where anybody who has violated any provincial act, and there's 315 provincial acts in this province, as far as I counted, and these are like the Divorce Act, the Building Code, the Highway Traffic Act. There's even something called the Potato Act. If you violate the Potato Act, you cannot run for chief and council at all, right? 315 provincial regulations, none of which apply on reserves because they're lands reserved for Indians, which are a federal designation, and you can't run. If you have ever had a criminal, if you've ever had a criminal conviction for anything, you can never run for leadership, ever, no matter if you served your time or you paid your dues. So it shrinks who can possibly be on council. And then the craziest thing of all is that there's a complaints and appeals board, and this is similar to what they're doing with trying to do with the cannabis board, is they try to create a separate committee that's not them, but really is them. So the band administrator, band executive director, gets to pick 3 people who don't have to be Millbrook First Nation people, but who need to have a background in investigation and in law. Okay, so to me that means cops, maybe lawyers, right? Though these 3 people now have the power to remove the chief or any councillor whenever they want. They're the veto on top of your election choice. So they can remove them if they're breaking the Potato Act. They can remove them if there's a petition signed by 50 people, can come together and say, oh, we don't like so-and-so. And they also, you can't run if you hold a tobacco quota, right? And you can't run if you're breaking a banned bylaw. So if you're selling Mohawk smokes and the band has said, no, you can't sell that, and you're like, excuse me, I have a nation-to-nation right to trade tobacco, they can say, oh, no, you don't. Actually, you're not eligible to run. Or, oh, you did that when you were on council? Oh, now you're out. Our complaints and appeal board has removed you. And the final thing I'll go through is there's this whole nest and kind of, it's like a maze of policies that they've been developing over the last few years that all kind of reinforce each other, that all build up this all-powerful band administration, reducing the insight of the people, the transparency. And so you'll see it in the code of conduct. Right? Get this. In the code of conduct, your elected leaders, the people who are supposed to make decisions on your behalf, are required to refer all policy-related questions and concerns to the band administration. Don't try to figure it out yourself. Just refer it to them. They'll deal with policy. What's policy? Policy is a solution to your problems. You have a housing problem. Okay, let's define the problem, come up with a policy to fix it. Let's now put it in place.
Make a policy to help ourselves and not you.
Yeah. Well, you're not, according to the code of conduct that the councillors sign, they're not to interfere with the execution of duties and responsibilities of the band administration and not to undermine their authority. And if you do, you violate the code of conduct. And if you violate the code of conduct, then the 3-person committee can remove you. So I will end it here, but just merely say that both of these laws are anathema to your rights. They're the exact opposite of what your rights are. And if they're passed, they will further increase the power, control, money, and discrimination that you're facing at the hands of the band administration. So it needs to be defeated. And there's nothing that you can save in these laws. There's not you can't just, if you take out all the stuff that we've listed here as problems, there's really nothing left. And you're better off sticking with the Indian Act system of elections, which is at least forthright. And you're better off running your cannabis industry as it's being run. I'm not aware of huge problems or issues, and if there are, well, then you can take a look at in your document package, there's a third position paper authored by myself and Chief Riley that outlines what would a Section 35 compatible cannabis law look like, right? So what's a way to have a form of cannabis regulation that matches your Aboriginal and treaty rights and doesn't take your rights away, right? So you can't have licenses because these are your rights, right? You don't pay for a right, and get a license for it. You just do it. So it's expressed within that document, and hopefully now we could have a discussion and question and answer, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
The book is finally out. It's been a grueling process for me, but now you can order it at the bottom of this presentation. Order it quickly because they will be gone.